What's up, Taylor?
Friend,
How you doing?
good. How are you?
Doing all right. Can you hear us okay? I'm doing like a new mic situation.
It's looking good. It's very weird to also be on the screen and then see y'all watching me on the screen. It's like level two in one.
And you can see like the student view too over here. Like there's two cameras.
I see a professor here, and then there's an unverified that has like it's looking like some Eastern European symbols, like right there.
Okay. I've got another one that's up that's supposed to be facing towards the students.
Mhm.
And I don't we switched to Teams, and so I'm kind of screwed with Teams, to be honest.
Ooh.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But worst case scenario, I'll just turn my laptop around so that when we get to the Q&A, you'll be able to see the students. You know, in the meantime, they're all right behind the screen right here and eager to talk to you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So Taylor, just like normal, I'll give you an introduction. And I'll do a little more since we've got some folks from the public here. We'll talk a little bit about what this class is about. I'll introduce you, and then we'll get right to it. And then I've also got a student next to me right here who is co-moderating. This is Jordan Pinkney, who's going to be.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, Boo, how are you?
Pretty good. What about yourself?
Doing lovely. I cannot complain.
Beautiful. All right, let's get right to it. So thank you for anyone who's joining us from afar. We are a group of students at Johnson C. Smith University, which is a small HBCU in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is a part of a course that I've been teaching since 2019 called Rapsody's Eve and Hip Hop Feminism. This course it traces the album Eve by Rapsody, and each kind of track being a different week that we study this semester. And we engage the different ways and the different texts that Rapsody engages, and we kind of do a deep study of womanist and feminist theory through the album itself. And so Taylor has been a part of this since the beginning, and I've been very grateful for her labor this entire time. And so if you're unfamiliar with her work, which I assume most of our guests joining are probably very familiar with it, but Taylor Crumpton is a freelance journalist of pop culture, music, and politics, originally from Dallas, Texas. In her work, which can be found in outlets like Pitchfork, Marie Claire, Variety, NPR, and the Wall Street Journal, Crumpton writes about a range of topics from Black queer advocacy to the and underrepresented hip-hop scenes in our home state of Texas. Additionally, Crumpton uses her platform to advocate for underrepresented voices, to examine unethical racialized labor practices, and to discuss freelance journalist practices. Her first book, Contracted by Halfway Books, considers Big Tuck's Purple Hulk, a 2004 mixtape that's largely gone, if not completely underexamined by hip-hop scholars outside of the Dallas area. More recently, her work on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter has been featured in Time magazine and the New York Times, and her labor on all these ends has resulted in two forthcoming book projects. One is Girl Please, a love letter to Black women on reality TV, and the second one is Coronation of the Queen, an illustrated retrospective of Beyonce's career. So please give a warm welcome to our illustrious guest, Taylor Crumpton.
Wow, you were so sweet. I'm telling you, you give me the best intros and bios of all time.
Look, I got to do my duty. So I want to start us off here in the conversation because Jordan has some really interesting questions, especially surrounding kind of like your journalistic practices and stuff like that. I wanted to start us off because I feel like kind of you won a Grammy this last weekend. Because you've been doing this work to advocate for Beyonce for so long, and advocate for seeing the various Black musical traditions that come out of the South in a more nuanced and engaged perspective. So can you, like, with the class, I want everyone to know, like, this Time magazine thing and all of this, like, this is the icing, but the cake's been baked for a long period of time. So Taylor, can you talk about, like, your passion for doing that kind of work and how it feels to be finally circulating in these, I guess, like larger national outlets?
Number one, it's always been a labor of love. I have always wanted my career, even before I was in journalism. I was a social worker doing direct service with LGBT youth. I've wanted to center who I am in everything that I do, and not out of a way of narcissism, but I think to take from the Black feminist practice of using your own lived experiences to speak truth and light to the inequalities that we all experience based on our race, gender, and in Cowboy Carter, very much where you come from. I think the Academy has not done a stellar job of honoring and centering Southern hip hop and scholarship, but also making space for the Black Southern experience. And Beyonce, in my personal opinion, after Tina Turner, is one of the most examples of Southern Black femininity in womanhood and what it means to move through the world, the music industry, the entertainment industry, every single industry that she is a part of, knowing that sometime they have been criticized for their accent, for their tongue, for their language, for their locale from their region. So I've always thought that a country music album was within her because she is from the country. And to take from Southern hip hop, when rappers from the South were coming, Mark, baby, do you mind muting? I know it's an allergy season, and I think I heard you sneeze. Thank you so much, beloved. Southern rappers were told that they couldn't rap because they were country and backwards and illiterate, and that they couldn't even rap because of the way their tongue is, right? And I've heard from my parents that, especially my dad, his job made him go to language classes to remove his accent. So I also know what it is to have people in my own family, as well as myself, have people say you cannot be country and you cannot sound like this. Even the white Southern accent is applauded, and we see that a lot in country music. Black Southerners can't be country because they're seen as backwards and illiterate, which to me is just a reminder to folks that there's a reason why I have this accent, and America has yet to really wrestle with Jim Crow and segregation. In that same vein, I think Beyonce being proud of her accent, being proud of her lineage, being proud of being in the South, being proud for being from the country, opens up conversations and dialogue that have very much been kind of hidden because nobody wants to talk about the strong lineage of Black people in the South and our history in the South, and that we should not be proud of it. And I myself am grateful to be part of these national and international conversations because I think it's shining more light on this very niche experience that, in my opinion, is the most American experience, which is to be Black and from the South.
That's beautiful. And so, like, and this is a part of kind of your broader practice of your journalistic interests, because for those of you who don't know or didn't see in her bio, that Taylor also has a background in social work, and before she became a journalist, was doing a lot of advocacy through social work. And so, Jordan, you like had a lot of questions about her like journalistic practice, and so I think along these lines and thinking about how you use your platform, I think some of Jordan's questions might be appropriate along those lines. So I'm gonna put you right here.
Well, for one, I hear you talk a lot about your experience. But when it comes to getting an idea, I know that do you keep pen and paper with you when you get an idea, or do you type? What is your method for
I am in my office. I have so many notepads. Fun fact, a lot of the pieces that I write in my column in Time, I handwrite them. For me, writing is a spiritual experience. I see that a lot in the works of Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston, that writing for Black women has always been us being in conversation with spirit. When folks ask me when an idea for an article has come from, I'll say, oh, I'll really just be at my couch or cooking, listening to a podcast, and something will ignite within me like a fire and a spark and a flame, and I'll write it down. Also, I'm of the generation that learned cursive. I do not know if I am part of the last generation. I don't know if y'all's generation learned cursive, but I remember being in grade school and they're like, writing in cursive actually is good for your brain because it gives you this natural rhythm and this fluidity that I don't experience when I type. Um, and that's very helpful for me because I'm also someone who, as a little girl, was given a journal to kind of get all of her feelings and her thoughts and experiences out, which also brings my voice to light in the work. Um, Outside of just pen and paper, I love having friends that are not journalists who do not work in industries with me as almost if we have to be very scientific as like focus groups, like especially around Cowboy Carter, I'm like, well, I feel X, Y, and Z about this. How do you feel X, Y, and Z about this? Because conversations also are regenerative. And I like having friends who also did not enjoy Cowboy Carter, right? I think it's good to have a diverse group of friends when you are in the process of idea creation or idea formation, because they will make you aware of things unseen. So I'm very much an old school lady, pen and paper, talking with some close friends, and also when the weather is right, going outside. I think writing is more spiritual than one thinks.
I'm glad you mentioned that about what I need to remember. I always do something. I don't imagine what for hours of like in schedule, needing time to think, but also getting a perspective.
Sweetie, you're going in and out a little bit. So
Here, the mic is here, so you can hold the mic. There you go.
Well, I know you mentioned that you always keep a pen and paper with you. So in doing so, how do you keep up with coming up with ideas, having a schedule, but also balancing the opinions from your friends? How do you merge all that together?
my friend always jokes it's because I have a Virgo moon, a strong earth placement, which is why I'm able to keep things together. But I think truly I knew at a young age that even though I went to undergrad, I went to graduate school, I had a 9 to 5 profession that I worked hard for, that writing one day was going to be my bread and butter. But I also knew because of my personality and who I am, my Mars is in Libra, so I get aggravated when things are unequal. And there's no greater unequal industry than entertainment and editorial and journalism and publishing, that I had to develop a schedule that worked best to me according to me because I am my own boss. So I had to know myself. And oftentimes, if you are a creative arts professional, if you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, you have to also be your own disciplinarian. So for myself, I have certain days where I'm just doing administrative work, which is the unglamorous side, the invoicing, the quarterly taxes, the making sure your website's up to date, looking at analytics. And I know for me, I can't do that on the same days that I'm writing. So you have to look at whatever your schedule is, whether you're going to do a 5 day, a 7 day, and think about your blocks of productivity and what works best for you. So, for example, I don't write on Mondays. Monday's an admin day, but I write on Sundays, which is typically a day of rest for people. But for me, that really gets me going. So you have to understand in whatever profession you're going to do, but especially writing editorial, if you're not going to be staffed, you have to figure out what blocks of productivity are best for you and work with those blocks. And also, for someone like me who has a monthly column in Time, so I am expected to write an article once a month. I have a great editor who also understands my blocks of productivity. So, for example, she works on Monday, she goes into the office. I'm really not going to write on Monday, but I'll write on Sunday and have that ready for her at Monday. Because also, as a freelancer, you have to work with people who have these 9 to 5, these blocking schedules. And if you don't communicate and advocate for yourself, then that will damage your bottom line and pocket.
I do have, well, I have a lot of questions, but
You do it one more, and then I'll go.
all right, that's fair. That's fair.
Oh,
Have you ever had to hold off on a story? Like it took you maybe a long time to get the idea, but depending on what's going on with the climate of social media and pop culture, you're just like, yeah, I could, but I'm gonna wait another time to do so.
I have not had that experience, but last year I wrote an article in Time about hip hop and Me Too. And I believe the idea was brought to me originally sometime in the spring. And that article took a whole entire quarter, 3 months, 90 days to come out. And for me as a writer, I started to get this intense level of irritation because I was like, why do we have to continue going back and forth with this? But for me, it was my first introduction to having to work with a legal department, right? Meaning that, yes, you and your editor may have agreed on this topic, this piece, hip hop, me too. But when you're naming people in this piece, for example, the milieu of men in hip hop who have allegedly been accused of sexual violence against Black women and girls, then you have to bring legal in, which is something I'm also experiencing with book writing, right? These words live on forever. They will outlive you. Hopefully, they will outlive AI. And for me, that taught me the importance of my words because oftentimes when I was a young writer starting up, my journalism career started when I was in college. So I've always been writing. I did not have the understanding, nor did I have an editor in a publication with a legal department that would protect me and shield me from things. So oftentimes, I'm still in the process of learning what it means to work with a publication that will not exploit you. Because when I came out in journalism, which was around 2016, 2017, a lot of young writers were being hired and commissioned in response to the first Trump presidency. But so many of them were subjected to doxing and harassment online. So I understand why some people would be fearful and afraid to publish something because over the years I've been a writer, I've seen more increase online attacks against writers. But that's the blessing of finding a publication and editor that will defend you and protect you because oftentimes writers, especially marginalized writers, are left to fight and defend for themselves, which I believe is highly unjust.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm gonna let you finish. I promise. I promise. But you literally hit the nail on all the questions I want to ask you because with the conversations of the TikTok ban, voices of Black creators online, censorship, there's a lot. And with the fact checking, especially, AI is literally going so fast right now. And especially with being so reliant on these things, it's going to wipe out the digital respect, the time, the energy, the effort. I mean, even I don't know if you heard, but Apple had this new feature and BBC did an article on it and they addressed it, but Apple swiftly came in and addressed it and it involved fact checking and an AI new software. So how do you think that's going to affect journalism and the digital voices of content creators that want to get that chance? But the one primary thing is that platform favors the opportunity to get seen quicker opposed to another platform, and then AI is right there in the middle. I know that was a lot.
I love that question. It's a beautiful question. I'm glad you asked. When I was young, starting off in my journalism career, I did not think about longevity. I did not think about legacy. I just thought that I was a young Black girl online who had commentary and wanted to contribute my voice into conversations, right? I generally entered journalism on a whim. Really, it was a chance opportunity. I'm glad that that window opened. However, so many young people got hired by these big brand name notable publications and were exploited, were overworked, were underpaid, and if I have to be completely honest, were encouraged to share things about their personal life as a way to make an essay feel more timely, maybe not well researched or gone through fact checking because they're just using their personal background and lived experience as the argument for the piece. And then that opened them up to so much critique, and not only themselves, but their family, where they went to school at. Everything was tainted by an editor or a publication allowing them to publish an essay that was very personal to kind of get traffic to the website. I think we forget that
People are human.
but also virality ends up in traffic and sales, right? I did not understand when I was younger that when my essays would go viral on Twitter and I was only paid $75, that that publication was making more than $75 in revenue and responses online, right? These algorithms are anti-Black in nature, are
You're so true
anti-women
about that.
in
You're very
nature.
true about that, yes.
And if you are a Black woman, whether you be a journalist, whether you be a content creator, editorial, in whatever field, whoever owns this platform and is feeding that algorithm is going to do something to make you react because your reaction goes viral and will always feed their bottom line and pocket. So my words of advice of encouragement is do not allow them to make you a fool. Do not allow the internet to make you a fool because the internet will exploit you, use you, abuse you, let your body be dead in the ground and move on to the next person. So I encourage young people think about you have this anger and this passion. Where can you mold and develop and shape and transmute that into something that is beneficial for you? You may go viral on TikTok, but TikTok will never give you equity. You may have a viral essay in a publication, you will not get equity in that publication. So, how are the ways that you can not use publications in TikTok in a very exploitative way, but use it to help you to get where you need to go? Because oftentimes, writers, Black writers, young writers, do not have mentors, do not have someone who's going to step in and tell them, this is what you need to do. My mentor, she is not a Black woman, but she is a white woman who's written about hip hop since the 1990s. Her name is Kathy Idani. She wrote God Save the Queen. She wrote Baby Girl, the Aaliyah memoir. She's been in hip hop journalism for as long as I've been alive. And she has been very integral in me moving into book publishing, because she's like, Taylor, the critics back in the day, the Greg Tate, the first generation of hip hop critics, a lot of them died penniless because no one was telling them, go to LA and be a screenwriter, or go do books, get your PhD and become a professor. And generations of writers who were standing on were left penniless to die because no one told them what to do. And I'm seeing that a lot in the digital generation. You cannot be a content creator forever. What are you going to do next?
I'm glad you said that. And I know I said I stopped, but I can't at this point. I promise I'll give it back to you. But every time she says something, I'm just like, you don't know how much times I have conversation with myself about this. Like, it's true. Like, I feel like people don't take into consideration that Black people are not just giving you an experience, but they're giving you a specific niche to who they are. And taking such an experience in an article, it, it's giving them money, but you're also dropping the ball and considering, what can I do to accommodate their needs and their wants? Before I ask them to do something for free, what can I give them? I mean, I see they're a content creator, but who are they behind the videos they post? And to my next point, you did say TikTok's not going to last forever. And I can only imagine a few months from now, if it's brought up again, because it might get banned, so many people are going to be erased and you will never see that content creator that posted those videos. There's no backup plan, but in having so, you have to be so cautious about how you present yourself online, how people can follow you. I mean, the unspoken ways of how Black people communicate so people don't steal their ideas, how you migrate social media, not being able to speak up against things, but hoping that people catch on and they look like you, but also having someone else take your idea of a different race and have generational wealth within 24 hours, but not considering the other person that's probably put in 8 years worth of work online. That's very questionable in my eyes. And I could only imagine what's going to happen as censorship happens more and more, but seeing how there aren't laws around social media platforms having people put their IDs but not consenting them, is just going to get more and more, less and less. And there's not going to be much of a space for people to want to go into a field like this because they're not getting paid. In my opinion.
Is there a question?
Sorry, I don't know. You could take it. Here.
Well, Taylor,
Sorry.
No. I'm saying, I was just encouraging to ask a question. Is there, Taylor, do you want to respond to anything that Jordan was just saying?
Yet again, Jordan, these topics that you're asking of me are so great and beautiful. And I think the theme of what I'm hearing is, what's next and where do we go from here? As we are entering into this political environment in which I will always say Black people in the South have been living in fascism for a million generations. So if anybody knows what it's like to live over a white nationalist, overt supremacist regime, we should be looking to Mississippi and Birmingham and Alabama, right? We should be looking to people who for generations and family lineages have learned how not only to survive, but thrive when the odds are stacked against them. And if we have to take that to social media, TikTok, there have been so many small businesses that have been saved from a Keith Lee or a food content creator going and, bringing them awareness and eyes. And I think the ingenuity of Black genius is that we have always been able to use technologies that were anti-Black in nature to bring us wealth or security and awareness. I grew up in the Twitter generation where I saw people in Ferguson and Baltimore recording videos going live, and that's how I was exposed to citizen-led journalism. However, I think now we have understood that these tech companies are not only anti-Black in the algorithm, but they are anti-Black in who they support politically, financially. Spotify gave money to Donald Trump TikTok was at Trump's inauguration, Lord only knows what Meta is doing, right? We are living in an environment with Lex Luthor. So I encourage us to not be reliant on these platforms because they are reliant on us, right? People forget Facebook Live and Instagram Live rose in notoriety because of that tragic Black woman who was videotaping after her partner got shot in the car from a police officer. A lot of this notoriety and virality that social media has had in the past 10 to 15 years has been because Black people have been using the technology to record state violence and police violence. So I always think that virality has a hint of violence towards it. And when these platforms encourage content creators to go viral, they know that the unintended consequence, you may be doxxed, you may be harassed, you may be harmed, or if you're a young person, Lord knows, thank God some of my things you can't find off of the internet, but that can be used against you when you're entering the workforce or trying to go up for permission or a job. So I just want us to be a little bit more hypocritical aware of these platforms and what the true nature of them is, and understand that you are your own archive. That the one thing big tech can't do is read your journal. Big tech can't take photos from a scrapbook. Big tech cannot take conversation and news with your friends. I do think that there is a beauty in secrecy, and that is how Black people and Black religions and Black customs and Black traditions have been kept for so long. Secrecy is not gatekeeping, secrecy is archiving. So I think I encourage more young Black folks, young people, LGBTQ folks to start making their own archives, to going back to pen and paper, to scrapbooking, because also that is good for your mind, right? We know that being on these platforms for too long right now is starting to rot our brains and people are not able to sit down and read a book. So I do think that there is a window of opportunity as we're in this Pluto and Aquarius, transit for the next couple of 100 years, for us to be revolutionary in ways in which we are protecting and centering ourselves and our experiences, because technology will not keep a record of you. You must keep a record of you.
I'm glad you brought that up because, not that long ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I was doing research at the time Black Lives Matter was happening. And to see so many people that I didn't think made Black inventions, it's almost similar to TikTok. The digital presence of coming up with ideas similar to how slaves got their ideas stolen. So keeping a record of that, it doesn't exist. I mean, at the patent office, I mean, they could digitally wipe out someone's content like that and you wouldn't know how to find them. But in doing so right now, especially with the platforms, the hashtags, the blackout square, if you remember a few years ago, people couldn't make certain hashtags, people couldn't say certain things, opposed to another person that would still get that opportunity on TikTok because 3 years ago the algorithm was very biased. I mean, you see people every now and then, but they're still censored to that degree. So you can't get away with what you want to do and then expect people to find you because they only know your social media profile. Even within myself, I would like to be online, but I would be lying if I wouldn't say I'm a little bit cautious. And I would like to take my time to distinguish how to get the video, but also say it in a way that doesn't have people question who I am because I'm a Black woman. You just have to be mindful of that. I mean, I'm working my way up to doing so, but considering how other people do it so easily, I think it's questionable. You gotta gauge your content and also your private life. You gotta keep equal balance.
Of course. Here is one thing I always tell young people. Whatever you put on this internet, one day it's going to come back to haunt you and bite you in the ass. I sounded very much like my mother, but it's very true. She told me this years ago, and I, you know, did not really believe her as young Black girls who have Capricorn mothers do, but she is right. And as I get closer to 30, she's really starting to, be in my ear. We must understand that these platforms will never give us ownership. Big tech will never give you ownership. And if you do not own something, you do not own your Twitter profile, you do not own your TikTok, you do not own your Instagram, you do not own your Facebook profile, you do not own anything that's on your phone. If you do not own it, it can be taken away from you at any single point in time. That is why whenever the ban was happening, you saw every TikTok creator go and try to make a YouTube channel. Oh, follow me on YouTube. You do not own your YouTube channel. These algorithms would like you to think that you are a partner and that you receive some benefits, and in many ways you do. But we have to work towards building something that is independent that people can always find you at, right? So I always tell people, do folks in your city know who you are? Are you tapped into your local bookstore? Are you tapped into your local public library? Are you tapped into your community center? If all of your platforms got taken away, can you still do the work that you do? I think oftentimes we try to shoot for the moon and the stars, and that's beautiful. But there are also people who you can help right next to you, or maybe want to be in conversation with you. And that is how you really sustain yourself, because virality is fleeting. I have been viral, I have not been viral. I have been viral, I've not been viral. But the things that have kept me sane has actually been teaching at local high schools or going to local universities or even popping into Tyler's class. Yes, using technology, but this isn't on TikTok and we're not being monetized for this. So I always tell folks, yes, be mindful and aware, but think about ways that you can build whatever you're trying to do out in the real world, because we live in the real world. And at any time, you can be banned from these platforms and taken away from you. Are you still going to be inspired to put your message out? And if the answer is no, I think that's the opportunity for another conversation. If the answer is yes, then go outside and meet your neighbor and be active.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And thank you, Jordan, for incredible and very insightful questions.
You
Thank
killed that, Jordan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd come closer, but I'm a little catty cornered. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that.
So we're going to transition to Q&A. I see someone has already put something in the chat. So for those of you who are joining us via Teams, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And we're going to privilege a few students' questions first, since this is a part of a class. But at a certain point, we'll start to look at the chat as well. So we've got a student already with a question. And Taylor, again, we're doing a different mic situation. So if you can't hear something, just let me know and we'll try to figure it out. But I'll turn the laptop around so that we can go in. All right, Jamie.
Hi, Taylor. My name is Jamelyn. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. So I'm currently studying social work in my degree. So I was wondering, with your social work background, how did you kind of transition into cultural criticism in journalism? Like, how did that take shape as you were already, being a journalist?
I love these questions because I think people often forget that I'm a social worker, and social work plays a heavy part in how I do cultural criticism. So, as I said earlier in our conversation, I started journalism when I was in my undergraduate program for social work. In fact, the last year of my social work program is when I started freelance writing in the news and politics vertical at Teen Vogue. And I had such an intense passion for social welfare policies and services. That was my favorite class in undergrad. Still very close with my professor who taught it. And while I was in undergrad, I also had minors in sociology and psychology. And I was doing academic research in all three of those films because I was the girl who was always so curious about why folks seek to impress others, to dominate others, to try to one up over others, because I've always felt that collective power and reaching across the aisle and working with your community is the best way to do so. Um, so because of my academic background and training, but also as someone who, when I was on campus, was very active in student government, was trying her best to bring equity for Black students at my campus, it just seemed like the best way I could do this without endangering myself, because my undergraduate college made history for the most Trump voters in one single capital in the United States. And when I was doing on campus work, my car was being vandalized. One time there was like a car waiting for me, like outside of my house. So I also moved into more digital organizing writing out of safety and concern for myself, because I could not do that work in the field, unless I wanted to meet God a little bit early before my time. So long story short, I think my social work training, especially the social work code of ethics, dignity and worth of a person, social justice, the importance of human relationships, person and environment theory, all those things that you learn really influenced the way in which I thought about news and politics and music and pop culture. And even to this day, I take our code of ethics very seriously. And I think that has always been the practice and the guiding compass to my work, says how can this not terrorize or torment a person, but how can I speak the truth about this experience, whether it's the experience of a Black woman in the South, whether it's the experience about Megan Thee Stallion, whether it's going on to women in hip hop, thinking of it from a social work lens and perspective, and that there's always a call to action and change can always occur.
Thank you so much for answering.
Mm-hmm.
Who else has questions? Yeah, we end up.
Hi, I'm Jaden Massenberg. I'm a sophomore here at Johnson C. Smith University. And I was just wondering, is there something maybe in your childhood that kind of drew you to what you might want to do in your career, or a life experience that kind of changed your perspective of how you view the world and how it shaped your career today?
When I was a little girl, I thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian. I really loved watching the Chappelle Show with my mother and older brother, though I do not approve about his commentaries and remarks about trans people, because as we know, social worker, I do not approve nor consent of anyone who is attacking and poking fun at marginalized folks just for the benefit of it. Um, but personally, what really changed for me is that my mother, who I love very dearly, has always been disabled since I was born. And I was raised by a single mom in a predominantly white suburb, not white, did not have the class, status of my white peers and classmates, but I understood that I was different and I was othered. And I think over time, seeing myself and my identity and my experiences rub up against my classmates made me aware that maybe I need to find an outlet to channel this, right? And I found writing to be very helpful for me because when I was a little girl, I was very angry. I was reading something earlier today about like Toni Morrison and Black women's anger, right? And also thinking about how so many Black women suffer from autoimmune disorders because they don't express their anger, they hold it in, and then that leads to, the the fading away of our body and our essence and our being. So I think growing up in a predominantly white environment, in a suburban environment, and one of the richest suburbs in Dallas, shaped me, but also being homeless as a teenager with my mother shaped me because I understood that no matter how adapting or accommodating you are to these forces, they will always be anti-Black and anti-woman in nature, and they will leave you to die. I think being able to go to social work school and learn about the femination of poverty and that these are these state and governmental forces that from the existence of my birth have been working against me has always inspired me to talk about these experiences, to write about these experiences, and to also, I think, hopefully create space for girls who are like me or have shared experiences to find community and comfort with each other. Because when I was growing up, my mother was like, you just need to go to college and get a good job. And writing has never been seen as a good job. That's why I went to grad school and I worked really hard and I was a Pell Grant recipient and I was a first generation low income kid. So I think my early childhood really shaped and molded me who I am today. And now I pray and hope that when people read my writing, they can see that and that inspires them to kind of find a way to move through this world that will always try to make you anger. The function of white supremacy is confusion. And for me, writing is something that makes the world very clear and transparent for me.
I like that answer.
Other questions?
I'm glad you do.
Other questions? Yeah, Shelby.
Hi, my name is Shelby. I'm a senior here. I have a question as far as like, do you feel like marginalized community will ever be equal? And if not, do you feel like, because we had a question like this last Tuesday in class, do you feel like if marginalized people were at the top of a hierarchy, how would that world look like?
I think so much about the text pedagogy of the oppressed. I don't know if y'all have read it in your classrooms or in your studies, but one of the points in that book sometimes the colonized will then become the colonizer, the oppressed will become the oppressor. And I say that because though we have a congressional Black caucus, when we look at the voting decisions and the political agendas of some of our Black congressmen and women, some of them are very anti-Black in nature, right? I think a lot about what has been going on in politics within the last 12 to 16 to 18 months, and how there were Black Americans who did not vote for Kamala because they understood what was going on in Gaza could easily happen in Atlanta or Baltimore or Philadelphia. I do not believe that marginalized people should aspire towards an idea of equality that is still rooted in the oppressions of other, whether in the United States or abroad. I've always been someone who believes that if we think about Afrofuturism, that we can dream and imagine a radical Black future that does not have to be built on whether I feel comfortable now in the United States, someone is suffering because of my decision. You know, there has been a long line of Black activism in the United States that has also touched and impacted and been in conversation with, Black students in South Africa in the 1980s during apartheid. People forget that it was organizers in Gaza and Palestine that were communicating to organizers in Ferguson on how to, clear their eyes with milk from tear gases. There was a George Floyd mural in Gaza. So I very much think that the road towards equality has been one that has been co-opted and has made some Black Americans in the United States be disconnected to folks who are also suffering from oppression of the American state. I'm someone who's always going to believe in the principle of Afrofuturism and Black radical futures, rather than an equality that's still rooted in the detriment of others.
Other question, Naze, do you mind?
Hello, my name is Naze. I have a question, but I'm not sure, like, I don't know if it's gonna make sense. So I remember we talked about in class, like, how white people are still basically benefiting off of Black people's, like, hard work and labor, and, like, the white man is still on the Black man's back. So in terms of that, like, do you think in hip hop that's ever going to change?
So Kendrick made history at the 67th Grammy Awards. Not Like Us is now the most decorated song in Recording Academy history. Kendrick is often credited with bringing back beef to hip hop, though Not Like Us could not occur if Megan did not throw the first brick with Hiss, in my personal opinion. And to be quite honest, women in hip hop have been doing regionalism for quite longer, which precedes Not Like Us. But if we have to think about mainstream terms, Kendrick is applauded with bringing back regional to mainstream. And even though he won his awards and he received one from Diana Ross and spoke very poetically about all the neighborhoods in Los Angeles that get ignored, even G and X and the Pop Out were great examples of him using a platform, a worldwide platform, and bringing rappers to be watched by millions of people across the globe on an Amazon Prime concert event. But who owns Amazon? Jeff Bezos, who is, even though Harvey Mason is a Black man, the CEO of the Recording Academy, who owns the record label that Kendrick distributes his music on, right? So it kind of is connected to the previous question. Yes, he's doing a worldwide practice of what it means to be proud and who you are and your identity and a Black identity. That's something Kendrick's been doing in the mainstream for the past decade. And yes, he's been able to achieve wealth. His children will be okay. Their children's will be okay. He's doing work in LA. He's becoming a civic leader. He's donating to a lot of LA neighbors and organizations that are benefiting from his donations. But yet again, who owns these institutions, right? And who are the the stakeholders in the power. So I think we must understand the current existing limits, right? Change doesn't happen overnight. Change is something that is small and incremental. So I do not believe we're going to see it in our lifetime, but maybe our children's lifetime, if enough people are dedicated to it. You know, the person who won the first hip hop Grammy, hip hop boycotted the Grammys, right? So there are ways artists, if they wanted to work together, could make this change come faster. But I am very fearful and afraid that because so many of the colonized want to be with the colonizer, that we've seen a lack against those who are Black and have the power to make change, to stand together and to make it equal for the average Black man.
Answer your question. Let's go ahead and pivot. You can back here for now. Let's pivot to our question that we've got online here in the chat. Janae, and please, if I'm saying your name wrong, please correct me. If you wouldn't mind unmuting and just asking your question from the chat. Janae C here. Oh, she says, give me 1 sec. So we've got another question here from, I think it says Audrey. Audrey, do you want to go first?
Hi. Yeah, sure. I'm so excited. I just thought I was gonna be on the chat. But hi, I'm Audra. I'm a local journalist here in Austin, and I work with the hip hop community here. Taylor, you and I have spoken on Instagram. I know I saw Tyler, you were checking out our stories. Oh, and if the other person wants to go, I'm okay.
You got it. Go ahead.
You to put is on the chat. But I just really wanted to interview you on the show, Taylor.
Oh yeah, we can definitely make that happen. My email is public. I'll just put it in the chat. You can just email me and we'll make it work.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to say too, I'm the one that interviewed Lance Scott Walker a couple weeks ago. So yeah.
I love Lance. Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, cool. Janae, are you ready?
Yes, I apologize. I work from home, but I am at a coffee shop, so it's loud.
Yeah, no worries.
So my question essentially was, so I have a big interest in both Black feminism and hip hop and pop culture. In undergrad, that's what I studied actually. Did an independent study about it, and I'm hoping within the next 2 years to potentially get published. But one thing that I have found a little bit I hear one thing and then hear another when it comes to the sexual liberation movement in regards to Black feminism, but it's almost like a different perspective in hip hop and pop culture. And I feel like those two sort of kind of, what's the word? They sort of kind of clash with one another. For example, one of the scholars that I particularly read is Patricia Hill Collins, and she focuses on the controlling image of the Jezebel. Mm-hmm. Me personally, I think of as long as it's authentic, it's cool because there are women who actually act like Sexy Red. There actually are women who act like Meg Thee Stallion. So I was wondering what your thoughts are, given that they're almost polar opposites when it comes to the opinions of those type of ideals.
I love our Black feminist scholars and foremothers, but they were against Little Kim when she first debuted. And even Bell Hooks, before her passing, did not have favorable things to say about Beyonce. And as much as I love the Black women's scholarship that comes out of the Academy, some of an older generation, whether consciously or not, do engage in horophobia. And that is something that I think younger generations are starting to interrogate and maybe do more research to kind of speak to the nuances of that. But I would not allow the previous hold beliefs and practices of Black feminist scholars to keep you from writing about this. I think to speak very highly of one of my favorite people from Charlotte, North Carolina, one of my favorite hip hop journalists, Clarissa Brooks. She wrote recently an essay about the history of, Lord forgive me because this is going to be recorded and distributed, but she wrote a long history about Congolese and hip hop and rap for Hearing Things Co. And it did a really good job of looking at the history of this one thing in hip hop and how it first came out as something that was like not really talked about, or like some of the men who talked about it weren't really in love or had favor with it, and then how women like Little Kim and Trina started talking about it, and now it's something that can be heard, on Billboard and Top 100, and even how it connects to social movements of women taking more agency and autonomy of their sexual liberation and ownership. You know, there is space for the older generation, but there's also space for the younger generation to write about that. So I would encourage you to do so.
Other questions from students? You guys have a question, something they want to know? Well, Taylor, I have a question. I'm curious, I think it's easy to look at your career, and especially where you're at right now, and be like, wow, she's been killing it. Things are just rolling for her. Like, it feels like every time I look at your Instagram, there's another great thing that's happening, and it's beautiful. But one of the things of being your friend is I've gotten to see the longer practice of how that's unfolded, and both like kind of, the triumphs and the setbacks along those lines. So for students who are interested in doing creative work, like you said, it's not like people are looking at a writing career and saying, oh, this is the lucrative way to go, and so there's a lot of things that you have to navigate through that. And so I'm curious for students who might be interested in careers and doing things that are unconventional or with paths that might not be well trod before them. Like, question one is, how do you keep going? And question two is, how do you know what's right and wrong for you?
What a great question, friend, because you've really seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Number one, do not feel the need to move to New York or LA for your career. Oftentimes it is said, if you want to work in these industries, you must live in New York, you must live in LA. These are the two media hubs, or even in Atlanta, because Atlanta in the past 10 to 15 years has really also become a hub for entertainment and media and music. My career started when I was an undergraduate student in Abilene, Texas. And if y'all are not familiar with that, it is a rural town 3 hours west of Dallas and 2 hours south of Lubbock. And I started writing and becoming internationally known from Abilene, Texas. And I wrote when I was a graduate student in Philadelphia, and I wrote when I was a social worker in Oakland, California, and I wrote when I was an editor in Dallas. And over the previous 12 months, I was staying with my dad in Las Vegas and became world renowned from a place known for casinos and artist residencies. And I never got to see the Usher show, which really sucked. I'm really kind of angry that that did not surmount for me. But all that to say, for the entirety of my journalism career, only very little of it I've spent in New York. I think there is something very special and unique about finding your voice and finding your power and finding your identity. And I hate having to say this word, but finding your brand and where you are from and what place you call home, because really that makes you be different and unique. And that's something that is so needed right now. I think that also speaks to Cowboy Carter. She didn't do country the natural way. She did country the Beyonce way. You need to write and start your career your way, centering who you are and what you do and what makes you unique. There are a billion Black women writers, and all of them are so beautiful and diverse and nuanced. Blackness is not a monolith. However, if you are going to be in a creative arts industry and profession where, unfortunately, not because of your own choosing, but because of publications and brands, they do limit the spots and access to people, which I feel is unjust. There's enough for everyone at the table. You do need to step into your power of what makes your voice different and what makes you different, so people will want to take a chance and an opportunity on you. Number one, know who you are. And if you know who you are and you know your voice, then if an opportunity is presented to you that seems sour or sweet, unsweet or unjust, you can say no. I think also young Black creators, when you're first getting to your industry, you feel the need to say yes to everything. You can say no and let your no be your no, right? We are living in such high unethical times. And these industries that you're entering, especially if they're entertainment, editorial, media publishing, there are folks in power who are doing things that are unjust and unkind. I'm preaching to the choir. You can look at what's been going on, Time's Up, Me Too, journalists saying that they haven't been paid by publications, photographers saying they haven't been paid for publications. What I'm saying to you is not an industry secret, but you have to know who you are so no one in power can push you or demean you. And number two, how I've continued to exist in this career. I've had articles stolen from me. I've had people turn my tweets into articles. I have been called everything but a child of God in my career. You know, I had to take down pictures of my little brother on Instagram because people were saying horrendous things about me in photos that he was tagged in. You know, oftentimes, even though it may be you doing this type of work, you understand that your once personal social media profiles then become your brand social media profiles. So you can no longer post your family, your friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, partner, because then people think that it's content and then they feel like they have something to say because their like means that you're getting traffic. You have to really create a cognitive distance between who you portray yourself online and in writing editorial to be, and then who you are. And I survived because I surround myself with people who know who I am before, thank you, FBI agent, before any type of virality or notoriety or anything. My best friends have known me since I was 8 and 10 years old and in high school. And you're going to need that. You're going to need people who just know you for you. And also, you're going to need to build in time to be offline and connected with nature and being your community. Because if you're always online and you're always reacting, your body's always going to be in a fight or flight, and that's going to affect you overall. So, in the spirit of Toni Morrison and Nikki Jeannie Gabani and every Black feminist author writer who's come before me, when they say they need self-care, and I hate how Audre Lorde's writing about self-care has been co-opted by the health and wellness movement, they understand that you being Black and female or Black and queer, the intersection of the two or the three, means that you will always be pushed to the point of exhaustion and dehumanization, because that's what white supremacy does. And you must make time and space to restore and take care of yourself because no one else will.
Beautiful. And advice that we all need to take, for sure. So I just want us to give another round of applause to our speaker for today. Thank you so much, Taylor, for your time. For those of you who are joining us via Teams, our next speaker in this series is going to be April Walker, the founder and CEO of Walker Wear and a hip hop designer who's going to be visiting our history of hip hop fashion class here at Johnson C. Smith. I believe it's February 18th, but I'll advertise online. So keep tapped in and I'll make sure to send the invite to anyone on the Eventbrite list too. So Taylor, thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me anytime, friend.
All right, take it easy, everybody.
Bye.